Welcome to the Living Ageless and Bold podcast. Each episode, I bring you amazing women who inspire, educate, and share their experiences and journeys along the way. So grab a glass of wine or a cup of coffee, find a cozy spot, and let's relax and have some fun hearing what can be accomplished after 55. Hey everybody, welcome to this edition of Living Ageless and Bold. Today is a super cool conversation with Dr. Amy Attas. She is the founder of City Pets, and if you can believe that there is a doctor or a veterinarian who makes house calls in New York City. And I'm sure she's got some incredible stories to tell, and her book just came out, and we're going to talk about that too. So welcome, Dr. Amy.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, it's great. So the whole purpose of this podcast is you didn't wake up today and have this amazing, you're a veterinarian and you're making house calls all through New York City. And I'm sure you've got funny stories to tell on that. But I always like to start with the journey. Like, when did you know you loved animals? When did you know you wanted to be a veterinarian?
So my journey started very early. There was never anything I wanted to be other than a veterinarian. When all my friends wanted to, be nurses or teachers and they were playing with dolls, I played with stuffed animals. And in fact, my pediatrician used to give me used hypodermic syringes. These were very different times. I would stick pins in them, fill them with liquid, and inject my stuffed animals. So I went to bed with a soggy bunch of animals on my bed. But I truly knew what I wanted to be from as early as I could articulate what I wanted to be. And it was a calling. And I am doing this for, 36, 37 years. And I still go to work every day as happy as I was from day one. I love what I do. So I'm a very lucky person. Now, even though I'm doing what I want to do and have been for decades, that doesn't mean this path was easy. So I really love this concept of talking about the journey, because my journey was not an easy one. And it turned out to be the best possible result. But sometimes when you're in that journey, it's hard to say it's going to turn out that way. And whenever I talk to students who are interested in going to veterinarians or young colleagues, I try to remind them that even though what you're going through right now might be stressful and the unknown is very stressful, if you really want something, keep plugging at it and give it your 100% all. And that's the best way to get the ultimate result that you want. So
and it's such an important lesson. We have a younger demographic too that listens, and we try to inspire a little bit with stories like that. My niece is graduating from high school next week, and she, like you, her whole life, all she ever wanted to be was a neuroscientist. That's all she wanted to be, a brain doctor. I mean, since she was 5 years old. And then she didn't get into the one college that she wanted to get into. And I keep telling her, it's like, you'll be okay. Like, you will find, this, you will be a neurosurgeon someday. You will cure brain cancer. Like, I just know she will, but she's hit some obstacles. And so let's talk about what did you have to overcome?
I'm going to share my story, and I hope that she listens to this. So I want to remind everyone that when we look at veterinary medicine right now, it's predominantly a female profession. And there are good and bad reasons for that. This was a profession that was closed to women for many years because people thought we weren't strong enough. We couldn't handle the large animals. Nobody can handle the large animals. You need chemical restraint to handle large animals. When I applied to veterinary school and got my interview at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, I was sitting in the waiting room and I was looking around me, and the wall had bricks, kind of like the background of where you're sitting right now. And on each brick was the name of the person who graduated number one each year in the class. And you would have looked at that wall and said, wow, I guess it's only women who go to veterinary school, because every single name on that wall was the name of a woman. But it turns out there was only 1 or 2 women per class. But in order to get into veterinary school back in those days, and this really was up until maybe a few years before I applied to school, you had to be so brilliant because they didn't take women. Over time, that has changed and the pendulum has swung. But again, at the time when I applied, women just were not thought of as going into this profession. So when I started my college years, and again, I always knew I wanted to be a vet. I started working for a veterinarian when I was 13 years of age. Nothing else interested me, kind of like your niece. I was at Barnard College here in New York City at Columbia University. Many of my classmates were pre-med, the same curriculum as pre-vet. As you can imagine, it was extremely, extremely competitive. And my advisors hadn't had a lot of pre-vet students, and they would look at the numbers and say, you really should think about something else because it's very difficult to get into vet school. That is not what an advisor should tell a student. I mean, if you have someone who's really passionate about something, help them go for their passion. Talk about ways to improve their application other than just straight academic scores. So I did that. I got a wealth of experience. I did everything I could think of to make myself have the best application to veterinary school. And I applied to veterinary schools, and I got interviewed at a whole bunch of schools, which was terrific. And then the day came when the announcements were in. We used to have to wait for snail mail back then, but I opened it up and it started with, "We regret to inform you." So I didn't get into veterinary school that year. I got waitlisted at one school, and it's kind of a funny story. I was the only person around who had an answering machine, okay, because who needed an answering machine then? And I actually got accepted on my answering machine in a series of telephone calls of, "Please call us back as soon as you can. We need to hear from you by 5 o'clock. If you don't get back to us by 5 o'clock." And the last call was, "We're sorry to tell you we had a spot for you, but we had to fill it by today." But I'm only telling this story because, when you look at these series of things that happened and I look back on them now and smile, this is the point. Retrospectively, you do get a chance to say it wasn't that bad. Ultimately, I got accepted to the University of Pennsylvania. It was my first choice. I'm a city girl. I wanted to live in Philadelphia rather than upstate New York. It focused more on dogs and cats, which was what my interest was. And I went on to get both a master's degree and a veterinary degree at Penn. So a little bit of a sort of circuitous path to get where I wanted to be, but ultimately I got where I wanted to be. But that journey,
Did you do the master's and then got into veterinary school?
I did the master's while I reapplied. So I actually have an additional degree in animal behavior, which just helps me be a better veterinarian. But I don't do clinical behavior. There are people who specialize in that for animals who have behavior problems. I'm a regular old dog and cat. I don't feel well, give me some vaccines kind of veterinarian. So I graduated from veterinary school. I went to a hospital called the Animal Medical Center. It looks a lot like a human hospital in that 8 stories, maybe 75 veterinarians, and they have different specialties like oncology, cardiology, radiology, dermatology. These are veterinarians who've gone on for advanced study. I worked there for a year, advancing my training, and then I went into a small animal practice on Park Avenue. So I was really exposed to some fantastic clientele. And I mean this in the way that advances veterinary medicine. Many of the clients I met in that Park Avenue practice were people of means. And the reason that's important in veterinary medicine is that the clients, the humans, have to pay for the veterinary care. And this was an opportunity where whatever was best for the pet was able to be done because the people had the means to afford it. So it was a very, very rewarding experience. I thought I was going to stay there forever. I was very happy. I bought an apartment in the neighborhood. And then one day, it was actually my 4th anniversary of working there. My boss said, "I'm going to take you out to dinner to your favorite restaurant. I'm going to give you a cash bonus. I'm going to give you a raise." And he said, of course, after I finished working for the entire day, "You're fired. Please take all of your personal belongings and leave now."
Wait. So he strung you on all day that he was going to do all these amazing things and then fired you?
And fired me. And so
Amy.
I know, but you know what? You would think that would be the worst thing that could happen. At the time it was, but it turned out to be such a blessing because I didn't have it within me to leave. I liked where I was and I was happy, and there's always a little bit of inertia involved as well. And by forcing me out right then, I had to stand on my own 2 feet and make something happen. And my first thought was I would get a job with another veterinarian in town. And then I thought, if I do that, who's to say this isn't going to happen to me again? So I'm gonna figure this out over time. My phone rang around 7 o'clock the next morning. I will be honest and tell you I was up all night trying to figure out what I was going to do.
Of course you were. Of course you were. And the younger people listening, these are the pivots in our lives that get us to where we are. That's why I always talk about the journey. And yeah, so of course you're up all night and then your phone rings.
And again, I want to stress to anybody going through this, you can't see the path when you're in the middle of this. You just have to trust that there will be a path. And so the next morning, I got a phone call from a client who called me at home and said, I called the hospital to confirm my appointment with you. And they said that you weren't in today. They don't know when you're coming back. They don't know where you are. And she said, I thought maybe something happened to you. So I explained what happened. And she said, well, how are you going to see my pet today? And quickly thinking, I said, you know what? I'll come to your house today. I went to 2 homes that day. I went to 4 homes the next day.
Wow.
And my now husband, then boyfriend, we sat up and we just said, could there be a business in this? And Steve said to me, you know what? This is just the right thing for your style of medicine. It's so personal. You really love to get to know your clients. I think doing it in their homes might be a really wonderful way for you to practice medicine. So from nothing, I started City Pets. That meant that I put advertisements in the New York Times and local papers. I went to every dog or cat event. I handed out cards, and I started my practice from nothing.
You did guerrilla marketing. That's how it works.
Absolutely did. Or can we say dog and cat marketing?
Dog and cat, yes. Animal marketing.
And, you know, I would come home every day and say, wow, I had a really difficult day. These were the problems I had today. And we would go through the problems and think of solutions for the problems. And sometimes, you know, there was a practical solution, but I would say things like, I can't afford that, or I don't see how I could possibly make that work. But I learned to just try. And one of the biggest obstacles for me in the beginning was, how do I get around from place to place? I was taking the subway, I was taking taxis, and I was before the days of Uber. And I came home one day and said to Steve, I had a premonition today. My premonition is that I'm going to die in the backseat of a taxi. And he said, you need to get a driver. And I said, I have a brand new practice. It's 2 months old. I'm barely making it right now. How in the world can I afford to hire a driver? And he said, I think you need to, just for peace of mind. I hired a driver and I immediately was more successful because I could get to places faster. I could carry more equipment with me. So it was a problem-solving approach. And 32 years later, we still have problems every day that need to be, you know, addressed in a problem-solving manner. But that's been the secret to the success. And so there are now 11 people who work for me. You know, initially people I trusted and respected said, this is going to be a novelty thing and you should do it for a little while until you figure out where you're going to land. And I figured out where I was going to land. I created this practice out of nothing, and no one had ever done this before in New York City. So
had it been done anywhere? Had you heard the concept, or you just took that 7 a.m. call and said, I will come take care. I'll help you. And then it just kind of evolved. So
I think pretty much every veterinarian occasionally did house calls. You know, if you had a really good client and maybe it was an end of life visit and the people didn't want to bring their pet in, you know, because dogs and cats get so nervous going to the veterinary office and they wanted to be at home when they said goodbye. We all did that. But imagine what a disruption it is to your day practice. You have to sort of pack what you need, leave the practice, spend the time out there, and then come back again. So, people saw it as a courtesy to do on special occasions. Once I started doing it exclusively, I realized how to make it a much more efficient thing than doing one call at a time. And then, of course, there was a man who did this back in the 60s. It's a very unique practice. He made house calls at night because he couldn't handle the traffic. So his wife drove him around and he would make house calls. And that lasted for a little while. But this was a full practice where, we don't do anything other than house calls.
So how quickly did it grow? You said you have 11 people now. You've been doing it for 32 years. Were you an overnight success with this, or were you building word of mouth kind of thing? Did it take years and years?
So the answer was I was immediately successful. I was immediately busy. So I had the feeling in the beginning that it had to be me all the time. And I was chief cook and bottle washer. And that is not a sustainable thing to do. I wound up hiring a veterinary assistant right away. I hired an office assistant right away and the driver. And there are amazing stories about each and every one of those. And that was sort of the genesis for the book in the first place. Coming home each day, I would just plop down. I was so tired. And I would say to my then husband, you will never believe what happened today, because the things you experience going around the city, making house calls, unique personalities, things you would never see in a brick and mortar hospital, because I am now, in people's homes.
In their homes.
Just led to so many interesting experiences. And when it happened over and over again, I realized I am never going to remember all of these things. And I started jotting down my notes. And I realized these were just the most unique experiences.
So tell us some of your craziest stories.
So I'm going to start with, in the beginning, hiring a driver. And I just put an ad in the local paper, and this very attractive young man showed up in my office. He was dressed in a suit. He carried a Louis Vuitton briefcase. And I thought, I'm talking to him, and I said, this is crazy. I'm interviewing you to be my driver. I think what I really should do is have you drive me around. And he said, that's fine, Dr. Amy. My car is parked right downstairs. My office was on West 57th Street. There is no parking right downstairs. And I'm like, you parked your car on West 57th Street. Let's run right away. 15 minutes later, we get to the street. His car was towed already. So what did I do in my infinite wisdom? I hired him. And he was my driver. Maybe for the first 5 months, I didn't take a day off during that period of time. And finally, Steve said to me, this is crazy. You're working so hard. My parents, who were elderly, lived down in Florida. He said, why don't we just take the weekend off and go visit your parents? And I landed at the airport. At that time, we didn't have cell phones. I had a beeper. My beeper was going off as soon as I landed at the airport.
That's a flashback. Hold on, everyone listening.
Beeper. Flash even more. I had to find a payphone. And
yes.
He kept saying, why are you so anxious? And I said, I'm looking at the number and it's my driver's number. And he said, well, what's the big deal? And I said, I don't know. And Steve said, well, it's not like he's in jail or anything. And I called the number and my driver's mother answered the phone. And she said, I'm terribly sorry, but he's not going to be picking you up at the airport. He's in jail.
He's in jail.
But, and this is where I realized that I was having just the most unique experience. Don't worry, his best friend will pick you up tomorrow. And then my driver's best friend became my driver for the next few months. And he was with me. And the thing was, he had been on the waiting list for 3 years for a job at the Parks Department. And of course, once he became my driver, he got a job at the Parks Department. But don't worry, Dr. Amy, my other best friend will pick you up tomorrow. So I went through these series of amazing young men, each one with a story during the period of time that they work with me. So there were the drivers, there were the employees, there were the unique clients that we would go and see.
That's what I want to talk about. You must have seen some wild things. Because like you said, when you see someone in their home, it's very different, when you're going to the vet's office or the pediatrician or whatever. We're always on our best behavior. But when you're just coming in, people, are as they are.
Well, sometimes in a literal sense. Like we had a client we called Naked Man because he would answer the door in his underwear. Now, the first time we were like, oh my God, sir, well, wait a moment, please go put your clothes on. And he was like, no, come on in. Like he was doing this for shock value. And we determined he was harmless, although obnoxious. And there's a really funny story about, I went on a fairly regular basis because he had an elderly pet. At the time when I did diagnose his pet with a condition that would require insulin injections, the pet had diabetes, I did insist that his entire family be home to learn how to do the injections. And of course, when we went that day, he was fully dressed. To which I said, oh my goodness, it's so nice to see you finally have some clothing on. And the look that his wife gave him was just with daggers. So, I mean, in his case, it was on purpose. But there are other instances where we joke that, I don't just show up in people's homes. They schedule an appointment. They know when I'm coming to their place. They have an opportunity to perhaps put some things away. But because we are in a service profession, I'm the veterinarian for their pet, I sort of fall into the invisible category. So, they tend not to change anything around. So we get to see people as they really are. Now, I don't want you to think that all of our experiences are like that. Some of them are absolutely amazing. And when you go around the apartment of a billionaire, or in this particular instance, a billionaire art collector, as I'm looking for the cat in every one of the rooms, I'm seeing examples of artwork that no one has an opportunity to see because they're in a private collection. So some of the benefits are really amazing. Or, for example, how about showing up at Billy Joel's apartment and being about to knock on the door, but he's playing the piano inside. So I decide that we're just going to stay there for a moment or two longer than we need to so we can have our private concert. Because once I ring the doorbell, he's going to stop playing. And of course, he's going to talk to me and we're going to talk about his pet. But I like to do that little private thing. So I don't want you to think that my clients are all celebrities. Obviously, Naked Man was infamous, but not a celebrity.
Right.
But doing house calls in Manhattan, it runs the gamut. So I go into the homes of the rich and famous. I go into the homes of absolutely normal, boring people. And I go into the homes of elderly people who we work with an organization that helps older people keep their pets at home with them. So we help provide the veterinary care for them. And then we go into the homes of people who, really are just struggling to keep it together, but they love their pets and they want their pets to have, for whatever reason, home care, rather than going to the animal hospital. So, even though my training is of a veterinarian and I'm there actually for the pet's purpose, I have had for these 30 some odd years such a unique opportunity to see every aspect of life. My tales are human tales because of my relationships with the people. The stories, again, I get into these homes because of the pets, but my experiences are really with the people. And that has been such a wonderful ride for me.
Oh, I'm sure. And it doesn't sound like you work a day in your life. You are doing everything that you love.
I am. Now, that's not to say that, I love being in New York City traffic all the time, the week of the UN General Assembly, and I can't get anywhere. And people are, I've been waiting for you for hours. It does have its unique challenges. they all go away when someone says to you, coming to my home, helping me out in this situation. Thank you so much for what you do.
How many days a week are you still working?
I feel like I work 7 days a week, but I need to explain what that means. I don't make house calls 7 days a week. It's physically not possible to do that because remember, when you're out on house calls, and we start at 8 o'clock in the morning and we finish at the end of the day, whenever that happens to be. We try not to book past 5 o'clock, but that can often be 7 or 8 o'clock when we're finishing. That at the end of that day, I still need to return phone calls that haven't been returned. Anything that's not time urgent gets returned at night. And then I have to write the medical records. So there's a lot of after hours work. And so I will often hear someone in my office say on the phone to a client, oh, Dr. Amy's not working that day, or she's not working today, for example. And I'm sitting in my office typing medical records. Not working means to them not on house calls. So I often work all weekend long finishing up. And pets actually don't respect evenings and weekends, and they do get sick evenings and weekends. So I take those calls as well. And so
you are an entrepreneur, and that's what happens. When you work for yourself, you have your own business, you are on call 24/7.
I think you've identified the second factor. It is my business. So I am constantly paying attention to every single detail about that. And my business takes care of living creatures. And again, those living creatures get sick. So, for example, if I have a patient that's newly diagnosed with diabetes and we have to determine how much insulin the pet is going to get until we get it on a schedule, I speak to those people every single morning, 7 days a week. And they give insulin injections every 12 hours. So most people do them either 7 and 7, 7:30 and 7:30, something like that. So we start our day with a phone call. How was the night? Is your pet eating? Getting all those details so I can determine how much insulin to give them. So it's really, it's a full-time job.
Yeah. But like I said, it's very apparent. You love it. You're passionate about it. So let's talk about your book, Pets in the City.
So as I said, coming home every single day and realizing I've had unique experiences. And I always felt like, oh, I'll remember these forever. And then, of course, a week later you say, oh, I know I had that great thing happen last week. Now I can't remember. So I began to write them down. And when I first started thinking about a book, I said, I'm going to write about my trajectory, always wanting to be a vet and then going through as, my experiences, et cetera. And when I did that, I realized I have just written the most boring book ever. Maybe my parents would want to read about my life story. But what I realized in the anecdotes I had, that they fell into interesting categories. And there were so many of them that sort of belonged together that the book rewrote itself in a more thematic manner. And so in that process, I realized I could tell a little bit of my own story. I could tell about the people and the pets that I've met. And then I could also tell about lessons learned. And so it's not a book of how to take care of your dog or cat, but there were things that I experienced over and over again in practice that I realized I wanted to shout out to people, like, we can prevent these problems if, for example, you don't do this. So on a beautiful spring day after a long winter, maybe people are inclined to open their windows, or in Manhattan, we have terraces, and open their terrace doors. And that is just an attractive thing for pets. They want to go up on the windowsill. They want to sniff. And the potential for danger in doing that is so great. And people just don't think about it. Or they might say something like, well, I've always had my windows open. Well, everyone who's ever had a pet who had an injury from falling out of a window always had their window open until the one time that went bad. So I've learned through the years to look for these things and then to fix them. And I fix them by instructing people, this has so many potential dangers. Just today, this morning, I was on a house call to a new client with his cat, a beautiful long-haired calico cat. And I walked into the kitchen where we were working, and he had a fantastic bouquet of lily flowers. Lilies are so toxic to cats. The petals, the leaves, the stamens, the stems, the water that the lily flower sits in, if the cat drinks it, is toxic. And it's not like a little toxic like you maybe have an upset stomach. It's toxic like you can go into kidney failure and die. And people don't know this. And I'm in
No, I
there.
never heard of that. We've heard of chocolate for dogs, but I've never heard of lilies
And
for cats.
chocolate is a problem and it's poisonous, but people often overreact and say, oh my God, my dog ate a chocolate chip cookie. Is he going to die? No, he's going to be fine. But cats who eat lilies can die. So we were carefully throwing those lilies out. And how do you carefully throw out a lily? By opening a garbage bag and putting it on top, because you want to get all parts of that flower into the garbage bag. So on a daily basis, I feel like I'm saving lives. And that is part of one of the chapters of the book is, things in our homes that are dangerous. So just the experiences that I've had have shown me that we need to get the word out there.
Yeah. Like I said, I had never heard of that. So the book just came out. Where can people get it?
You can get it at your favorite bookstore. You can get it at Barnes & Noble. You can get it at Amazon. You can get it as a Kindle book. You can get it as an audiobook. So,
fantastic.
Lots of opportunities.
Good for you. Good. Well, this 30 minutes went very quickly. But I wrap up every episode with the same two questions. So what is the greatest thing that you have accomplished since you've turned 50?
So the greatest thing I've accomplished is writing the book. It has been a dream of my lifetime, and I put it off and put it off and put it off. And then when I was ready to write it, I realized I am completely out of my comfort zone. I have no idea how to write a book. So I started and failed. I wasn't happy with my first draft of the book, and I kept going. So the answer is, don't be intimidated. If you don't make it on the first try again. And I think, I'm not going to say exactly how old I am, but it's way over 50. I think I am so much better now than I was then. All my experiences have just made me into better everything. A better veterinarian, a better wife. I like who I am now because I've channeled all the good stuff into it.
I love that. And I hear that from so many of my guests. And it's actually, I get emails and LinkedIn messages from younger women. And I actually speak to college students and they think, they have one failure, one thing goes wrong in their 20s and they're like, oh, I'm washed up. And then they hear our stories. It's like, well, wait a minute. She failed in her 50s and she still wrote a book and she's still super successful. So understanding these are just pivots in the road of life.
And I want to add to that, you need to fail. I think it's a part of the learning experience of how to do things better.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. If life were just all flowers and roses, what would we do? We wouldn't even know what to do. You have to have pivots, failures to move forward.
I agree.
Okay, so where do you see yourself in 10 years?
I see myself still doing this because it defines who I am. If I go on vacation, I'm looking at dogs that are walking along. I had to be in Florida recently, and I had an afternoon at the beach, and it was extremely hot, and a young lady had her dog on the beach, and I just couldn't be comfortable watching that dog pant. And you always have to be a little careful when you approach someone because, I'm infringing on their personal time. And I went up and I said, I'm sorry to bother you. I just want to let you know that I am a veterinarian and I always get a little uncomfortable when I see a dog this hot on the beach. Let me give you some suggestions on how to make your dog more comfortable. And if that doesn't work, I really recommend you take him back to the hotel and put him in the air conditioning. And she was so grateful for that. And then a few hours later, I saw her and she came over to thank me for the advice because her dog was much more comfortable. I will never stop being a veterinarian. So perhaps I'll work a few, not as many difficult days and, have some more fun in between. But for as long as I can do what I do, I want to continue.
Oh, that's amazing. And for everyone in the New York City area, if you need a veterinarian, Dr. Amy is amazing. You've just heard all these incredible stories, and she comes to you, which is great.
We like to joke in New York City, it's one more thing you can get delivered.
Yeah, and there you go. That's perfect. Thank you so much for joining us. I want everyone grab her book. We'll have everything in the show notes, links. If you are in New York City and you need a vet that comes to you, we'll have everything in there. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
It was really my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening or for watching this episode of Living Ageless and Bold. If you haven't already, please make sure you hit subscribe. And if you like the episode, I hope that you will give us a great review. You can also head over to livingagelessandbold.com and sign up for information, inspiration, and exclusive opportunities for us, women over 55. Thanks for listening. And remember, no matter what you do, keep living ageless and bold.